Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are around the world listening to this presentation. My name is Claire Rushton, and I'm a Senior Director with Walmart's Global Investigations Department, and I lead the Crimes Against the Business team focused on the most significant crimes impacting the business. Walmart is a global brick and mortar and online retailer based out of Northwest Arkansas, which is pretty much in the middle of the US, although I'm officially told it's in the South. Global Investigations is a team of investigators, analysts, and data scientists who partner with the business under the umbrella of global governance, and we all strive to ensure Walmart is the most trusted retailer. Many of us have probably used a gift card or loaded gift cards for family and friends. They're a versatile payment method that are simple and efficient to use. Unfortunately, they have minimal controls and regulations attached to them, and this results in a multi-billion-dollar industry that's largely untraceable. In 2017, Global Investigations started to see an increase in requests from law enforcement asking for data and CCTV on victim-assisted gift card crime. This is where the American consumer is targeted by phone and told that their grandson is in jail, or they have a tax bill or a computer virus, whatever scam they dream up at that time. They are then socially engineered to buy a gift card to pay that fine. The victims then share the gift card and the PIN numbers with the bad actors over the phone, who use the gift cards then to buy merchandise or more gift cards as a form of money laundering. When we began to see this increase in cases, Global Investigations engaged with federal law enforcement and started to develop our own analytics to give us better insight into these associated risks. In 2018, Global Investigations worked our first gift card case with the FBI in Denver, which was worth around $800,000. And unfortunately, this is far from the largest gift card case that we've worked. From this specific case, we learned a lot, which we then used to help us develop our gift card mitigation strategy, which included the development of a tool called Redemption. This is a Walmart proprietary product which is designed to identify unusual activity associated with gift cards through a set of fraud rules. The gift cards are frozen when these rules are triggered, which means that the bad actors can no longer use these funds. We've partnered with the US Secret Service and the US Attorney's Office, both here in Arkansas, to return millions of dollars of funds to our customers. There is an ongoing discussion across the business on how we can best share this patented tool with the industry, and there'll be more released on this topic soon. If you'd like to read more about the forfeiture program, CNBC wrote an article on it in early April of this year. The business also set up a cross-functional gift card task force to develop training and awareness, signage and business controls to mitigate the fraud. But as we all know, bad actors pivot, and this remediation is an ongoing task to ensure we protect our customers as much as we can from fraud. According to the Federal Trade Commission, gift cards continue to be the top payment method involved in scams as reported by older adults. Within this FTC report, the most popular cards used in scams does not show Walmart in the top 5. Now, by volume, we would expect to be listed as our footprint is so large, which does indicate that the work that the business has implemented is helping to protect our customers. Global Investigations has worked several gift card cases since 2017 and partnered with many law enforcement agencies to prosecute the runners identified. Unfortunately, the story is always the same. International call centers contacting American consumers and foreign national runners spending the gift cards, and the impact on the consumer is millions and millions of dollars. The specific case I'm going to discuss today is an example of our end-to-end process. Global Investigations has developed many analytical tools for the investigators to utilize to support in identifying and mitigating risk. One of these tools is a dashboard which shows the investigators hotspots where gift cards are being used to buy other gift cards via a barcode in our stores. This barcode is a key indicator of fraud, as it means that the gift card number has been turned to a barcode to scan at the self-scan registers, which is not a normal customer practice. A gift card number is turned into a barcode through an app on their device, and the runners scan this image from their phones at the register. This dashboard indicated multiple transactions using hundreds of different barcodes spiking in Texas. The investigators reviewed the CCTV associated with the transactions, which showed mainly elderly customers across the US buying gift cards while they were on the phone. Investigators then compared the gift card transactions to the CCTV, and it showed two females working independently, spending multiple gift cards from their phones. The investigators, through their diligence, identified two females and the vehicles, and they were then what they were using to travel around in. Often they would go in and out of the same store several times, changing items of clothing on each visit. Both were buying more gift cards and paying for them with the fraudulently acquired gift cards in multiple back-to-back transactions. Investigators could actually see on CCTV the images of the barcodes and the fact that they had received them through the social media platform WeChat. The evidence was collated and presented to law enforcement, who reached out to the potential victims to verify that the fraud had occurred to them. Law enforcement also conducted surveillance on the two runners and carried out search warrants to secure further evidence of the crimes being committed. In September 2021, the first female was arrested, and in January 2022, the second female was arrested. Together, both had committed over $2.5 million of victim-assisted fraud and now have been charged with multiple first and second-degree felonies. The photo on this slide is of my two investigators who worked this case, and they've been supported by law enforcement as they stand next to $681,000 of seized gift cards. As a result of this case, Global Investigations engaged the business to stop the ability of gift cards buying other gift cards at our self-scan registers. This was implemented in October 2021, and this type of fraud stopped across the country overnight. Global Investigations continue to monitor the dashboards because, as I already mentioned, bad actors do pivot, and we want to ensure we're looking in the right direction when they do so. Global Investigations continue to partner with the business to identify and mitigate many criminal associated risks. One of our key partners is Nathan and the AML team. I'll hand over to Nathan now.
Thank you, Claire. Wow, that's a lot of gift cards there on that image. That's very impressive. So like Claire mentioned, my name is Nathan Olds. I currently oversee the consumer fraud team at Walmart. I've been with Walmart a little over 7 years. One of the main responsibilities that we have on my team, on the consumer fraud team, is really ensuring that that we help to protect our customers from fraud, from falling victim to various victim-assisted fraud scams that you see. So the case that I want to talk about today, I'm calling Puppy Power. Honestly, that just came from cartoons I watched as a kid. My favorite one being Scooby-Doo. I remember that phrase being said, but this is regarding a animal purchase fraud scheme that we saw a couple of years ago. This was really prevalent during COVID. People were buying a lot of animals online, and we did see fraudsters taking advantage of that. So I'm going to go ahead and get into this case that we identified. And the initial identification that we had here was we started to see a lot of fraud complaints specific for an animal purchase scam that were coming in. We were getting those from our vendors. Customers were making complaints to our vendors that they were falling victim to an animal purchase scam. And we started to see a lot of these being received in Central Arkansas. So I think, like Claire mentioned earlier, Walmart is headquartered in Northwest Arkansas. We were seeing these concentrated about 3 hours away from where we were, where the money was being received. We started to look at these transactions a little bit closer, and we saw that all of these transactions were basically between $600 and $900. And really two patterns started to emerge in the fraud complaints that we saw. The first one was we had 4 different frauds, what appeared to be 4 different fraudsters they always had a date of birth in 1995 or 1996. And they had common addresses in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, or Orlando, Florida, along with a common string of digits that was within the ID numbers that they were providing. And I'll show you an example of that here in a few slides. The other pattern that we were seeing involved 6 different fraudsters, or 6 different names that were being provided. Almost all of these had the exact same date of birth of November 20th, 1989. And so there also had some common addresses with that pattern as well. And so we looked into it a little bit closer. The team wrote some SQL queries to kind of pull back all transactions that met some of those parameters that we were seeing with the fraud complaints, so that we could take a look at all transactions that are associated with this pattern, not just the ones that have been reported as fraud. So as we were doing that, that kind of initial analysis, we also were contacted by representatives from a local airport, and they had been contacted by victims of this scam because they wanted to know where their puppies were. They purchased this puppy online, and they sent the money for the puppy, but they never got the puppy. And so apparently what was happening was that the fraudsters were selling the puppy online, and then trying to get additional money from the victims, and saying that there's some additional fees that the victim needs to pay due to COVID-19, and additional like safety precautions and shipping fees that are associated with COVID-19 in order for them to get their puppy. And when the victims weren't receiving their puppy and they weren't getting any response from the fraudster, they called the airport. And so they reached out to us with this information, and just provided some additional detail there. So as we get into the analysis a little bit further, we identify that there's really two, kind of like I mentioned, there's two different trends that are going on, 2 different patterns, but they're connected. So we have both fraudsters that are receiving these transactions associated with this scheme in the central Arkansas area. So there's some times where they both go to the same store on the same day, or within close proximity of each other. The fraud type that they're both receiving money for is that animal purchase fraud. And then as we also looked into the data and looked into all the transactions, we actually saw 4 different victims that were sending money to both fraudsters. So we felt pretty confident that the activity was connected, even though we didn't see both fraudsters in the same store at the same time. We did have quite a few connections between the two, so we felt pretty confident that it was related. We also identified that in total we had a little over $50,000 that victims had sent to these fraudsters within about a 2-month time frame that we were looking at the time. There were over 70 different victims that we'd identified throughout the U.S. That sent money as part of this scam, trying to purchase a puppy. With the 2 different fraud patterns that we saw, so the first one, here's an example of it up on the screen, just some of the transactions. So this data, it's not exactly what the fraudsters provided. I did make some changes here just so we could protect the exact data. So this is really just for representative purposes. But as you can see with this pattern, the fraudster was using common addresses, and really just changing the number of the street, but using the same street name in the same city. And there were several different cities where the fraudster was doing this in. It was Orlando, Florida, Providence, Rhode Island, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It seemed like they just picked a street in each one of those cities and got a fake ID from that state, and then we're just changing the actual street number of that address. The dates of birth were, I think, about 3/4 of them. They used the date of birth of February 11th, 1995 or February 11th, 1996. So they weren't changing that information very much. And then also you can see they were with the ID number. They were using ID numbers with a common string of digits within a lot of those ID numbers, and just changing a few at the beginning and 1 or 2 at the end. It wasn't the case in all of the transactions, but it was prevalent in quite a few of them. in total, we had this fraudster that was associated with pattern 1 had received about $30,000 in total over that 2-month time frame, and they used 28 different names and ID numbers in order to receive that money. About half of the transactions were received for exactly $600. And then with the second pattern, I'll go on to that one. There are some similarities here with this pattern as we saw with the first one. I think it's over 90% of the dates of birth that were used by this fraudster were either November 20th, 1989, November 19th, 1990, or I think it was November 8th, 1989. It was almost all the dates of birth were one of those 3 dates. And they also were using common street addresses in various cities. They were using one in Dallas, Texas, Peoria, Arizona, San Diego, California, and Hawthorne, California. And they were doing something very similar to what the first fraudster was doing that we just went over in the first pattern, where they were using that same street name and city and state, but just changing the first the digits of that street number. So instead of 3723, it was 3721 or 3725. And this fraudster received about $23,000 in that 2-month time frame. And I think about half of these transactions were also received for exactly $600. One of the interesting things with this fraudster is, as we were looking at the CCTV footage for these transactions, which is how we were able to identify that it was really just these 2 fraudsters and not a lot of different fraudsters. It was just these 2 people that were using fake IDs. With this fraudster, when we saw this fraudster go up and to receive money associated with this pattern, we saw that they were carrying a Walmart shopping bag in one of the transactions. And so we reached out to Global Investigations and Claire's team because we tracked the fraudster back through the store, through the CCTV video footage, and identified that they had actually picked up a prescription. We were hoping that maybe they just used a debit card or a credit card that was actually theirs to help us identify their true identity. But it got even better when we saw that they had picked up a prescription from the pharmacy. We were able to work with Claire's team to get the information from that pharmacy prescription that showed the fraudster's true identity. So once we had that information, we packaged it together, packaged all the transactions we had identified up to that point together into a summary, and then sent that over to Claire's team and Global Investigations so they could take it from there and work with law enforcement. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there and turn it over to Claire to kind of talk about what happened in this specific case once we turned this information over to her team.
Thank you, Nathan. I was a big fan of Scooby and Scrappy too. So whenever Nathan's team send Global Investigations across a lead, we'll initially complete a full analytical workup so we can understand the size, the scale, and the scope of the case itself. We will then review this and, as applicable, engage with law enforcement. With this specific case, as Nathan already mentioned, the FBI were looking into it, so we partnered up with them to share what we had found from our initial workup. Then over the course of the investigation, it was found that there was no extended network beyond these 2 males, and they actually used 111 unique IDs at Walmart to receive approximately $87,000 over the course of 10 months. And all our evidence was handing over to law enforcement, and the first male was arrested in February 2021, and the second male was arrested in January 2022. Both have now been federally indicted, which is great news. So that's our cases. Thank you for listening to our stories today. If you'd like to connect with us and discuss these cases or ways we can partner in the future, please, our details are on screen now, so don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you.